Hi, everybody. Brian Norcross here with a tropical update. There's a lot of buzz going on about the tropics, so let's bring you up to date here. It's not quite as bad as it seems like, and as the buzz would imply, because the systems that we're looking at are both very weak and disorganized, and it's going to be slow to organize, I think, if they indeed do. There's very conflicting information on exactly what's going to happen. All right, let's take a look right now what's going on, and we have the two systems out there. This is the one of most interest to South Florida because it's positioned in the ocean in an area that systems that affect us often come from. So, and it's got a 90% chance of developing into a tropical depression or tropical storm in the next few days. So we'll look at that pretty closely. Then there's another one over here that's in the Eastern Caribbean right now. That one has a 70% chance of developing. So obviously, when we see a situation where we have these high percentages, we want to know exactly what the possibilities are. So let's look at the one in the east. This is the one with the 90% chance. And you can see it's part of a big area of disturbed weather here. Now, tropical systems don't like all this business going on. They don't like having a cluster over here that has some kind of rotation associated with it, along with the one the National Hurricane Center is actually kind of noting, this one over here. And you see it has pretty good spin, but when you have all this conflicting flow going on, that's an impediment to any one of the systems developing quickly. So that's one thing that it has kind of going against it in terms of getting its act together pretty quickly. The other thing that's going on here is look at the browns up in here. This is all the dry Saharan air, and you see it's very close to the system. The system is quite moist right now. It's kind of got a moisture bubble over it, but if it's going to move in this general direction, something's going to have to happen to that dry air, and it really has to do with what the flow is in the atmosphere. If the flow might push dry air toward it, well, that's going to be an inhibiting factor on it getting organized, or if it does get organized a bit, getting very strong, and indeed that's what the models imply. So here we are with our system. The idea of this area here, by the way, this is not a cone. This is a development area. So the National Hurricane Center is saying that they're giving it a 90% chance of developing somewhere in this area. Now, the idea, of course, is the system going to track that way, but it's different than a cone that gets more uncertain as you go into the future. This is just a general area where the system is expected to develop. When we look at the computer models, we say, wow, well, it's almost certain to go in this direction. But there's a couple of very misleading things here about just looking at those lines. First of all, this just tells you where the system is going to go. It doesn't tell you anything about whether it's getting organized or whether it's getting stronger or anything else. It just tells you that the flow, the general flow in the atmosphere, is going to take it in that direction, just the general flow. The second thing is that it doesn't really tell you, it doesn't take into account the errors in all these models. So let's just take this model here, which is the UK Met model. Well, guess what? The error is probably something like that in the UK Met model. So if each one of those model lines had a cone, it would actually be much wider, and it would tell us that every one of those models is predicting some kind of possibilities like that. So you can't just look at those lines and kind of think, okay, that's some kind of certainty. It just doesn't work that way. Every one of those lines has an error associated with it. And the farther out the lines go, and on the internet, you can find lines way up here, but what would that tell you is the error is something like that. So it's not even worth looking at. I mean, it's not any news that it's probably going to end up somewhere between Nicaragua and New York. You know, that's not informative. So that's why we don't draw the lines all the way over into our part of the world, and it's really not worth looking at them. Bottom line is the flow is going to take this system, whatever it is, in the general direction of the islands here. We can be pretty confident about that, but it could just be a moisture surge when it gets there, and some of the models indicate that. Some indicate a tropical depression. Generally, the good models do not indicate a strong storm at this point, but there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen here. Bottom line is we need to let it get clear of this messy kind of development area down here and then see what happens with the dry air. about Friday, when it's up here approaching the islands, we should have a much better idea of what we're dealing with. And then, if you notice, this flow is taking it right in the direction of these big mountainous islands here. So if it really does go by those big mountainous islands, that's going to be another negative factor on it. So point is, I don't want anybody here in South Florida to do anything but stay informed at this point. It has a lot of things going against it. That doesn't mean it couldn't be a problem. It just means that the odds of some kind of problem are very uncertain at this point, and at this point, not very high. All right, and then we talked about the idea of the flow associated with this. You see the upper level flow is kind of coming across it, which would tend to want to drive that dry air in there. So that just confirms what I was talking about. And then it would generally take it to the west here. That's the idea in the long term. When it gets over us, the flow is very, very kind of light and uncertain, so we'll just have to see when we get downstream. It's just too far in the future. Now, let's go over to the other system. This is the one in the Caribbean, and you see it's just kind of a kink in the winds. It's not, it doesn't have any kind of circulation, it doesn't look like. And it also involves this system down here in Venezuela, so over the landmass. So that's another complication for that one. So the conditions right now are not at all conducive for this organizing. It's got a ways to go. National Hurricane Center is putting that 70% on it, but really thinking when it gets to the Western Caribbean, it's more likely to develop. So that's where they have the 70%. It's not anytime soon. And again, this is the end of the week that it would get over there to the Western Caribbean. The models are not at all helpful because what is it it's tracking? Is it tracking this thing up here, or is it tracking some kind of center down here? It's not clear, but they do eventually take it, the ones that are able to track it, over into the Western Caribbean. And look at the flow over there. Well, it's a little bit light like this, but this is the upper level flow. So the bottom line is very light flow over the Caribbean right now. There's a big dip in the jet stream coming down toward the end of the week. So that might want to lift it a little bit to the north, but it's just too uncertain. Where is it? Is it down here? Is it up here? We don't know where it's going to be at the end of the week exactly. So that's, again, this is another situation where we've got to let it come together some before we even really talk about it in any significant way. All right, there's one more system to take a look at, which is just a little bit interesting. This is a very strong system, and it involves the remnants of what was Tropical Storm Kyle mixed in with a North Atlantic storm, and it's heading in the direction of Ireland, and it's going to bring something like hurricane force winds to Ireland late in the day tomorrow, it looks like. So this is one of those kind of rare storms that affects the British Isles, and it's heading right for them. So no doubt they're getting ready for that, and alerts are up from the Irish Meteorological Service there for very strong winds moving into Ireland and the British Isles. All right, that's the tropical update for now. So just stay informed about what's going on in our part of the world. Nothing imminent right now. Thanks.